This video is not going to be super long, mostly because this horse has very nice feet, so this is much more of a maintenance trim. She really doesn't have too many issues, and this is going to be sort of a rare video for me because I don't trim hardly any drafts anymore. And this happens to be a horse that is a Suffolk Punch, which is a very rare draft breed. I think there's only somewhere around like 200 breeding pairs left in the world, something like that. So not a very common breed of horse. And she's in her later years of life. And last year was kind of scary because she started having all sorts of physical problems. And the owner had some blood work done and found out that this horse has Cushing's. And her levels were really high. They were pretty off the charts. So she is now on medication and is feeling a lot better, and her hooves are in much better shape. As I nip along the front part of this hoof wall, well, maybe when I start rasping, you'll be able to see that there's a bit of a toe crack. It's probably the only thing that I'm still fighting with her with. She's not uncomfortable anymore, have the Cushing's under control with medication, just kind of working on that crack, trying to see if it trims out. If it doesn't trim out real well, I'll probably end up resecting it and try to open it up to air, but I don't do that in this video. We're going to just see if we can out trim the fungus first before we really open up the hoof wall too much. So I'm really just taking off the excess hoof wall and smoothing it with my rasp, starting my bevel, smoothing everything out. Frog's in good shape, bars are in good shape, so this is going to be a relatively simple trim on this horse, but satisfying nonetheless. With this hoof forward now, you can see that crack that's trying to travel vertically up the hoof wall a little bit, but when I stuck my pick in there, it wasn't really very deep, so I'm just going to leave it alone for this trim and focus on finishing my bevel and rounding up that hoof wall so it's smooth and she has some pretty good breakover. But the hooves are in great shape. The owner feeds a really good diet, an all forage based diet with real good quality vitamins and minerals, so really helps contribute to this horse growing a really healthy foot. You can see there aren't hardly any flares or dishing in this hoof, and a lot of that is due to the nutrition she receives. Well, I guess she also gets pretty consistent trims, but nutrition is a huge part. Now I'm working on this horse's right front, and looks pretty nice, pretty similar to the left front. The wear pattern is very similar. She does not have hoof wall separation, just a little excess hoof wall. I do have to be careful on this horse with how much heel I remove. If I remove too much heel, she can get sore. I've noticed a theme like that with some horses that have Cushing's or have had laminitis. You have to be pretty careful with their heel height. Yeah, in general, you would want to take the heels down as far as you could, but the horse is always right, so I use that as kind of a set of guidelines and try to listen to what the horse is telling me more than anything, because if the horse is uncomfortable after my trim, then I did something wrong, regardless of what I thought the right answer was. So on this horse, mostly just trimming that wall, and you can see right there, like that white part that's being revealed after I'm trimming it, it's pretty much the same thickness all the way around, maybe a little thinner in the quarters, but from heel to toe, that's really healthy, well-connected hoof wall. So really beautiful hoof, nice dimensions, medial laterally, very balanced. Frog's in pretty good shape. Just gonna take off some of those little flaps that might be trapping dirt and debris, straightening that bar a tiny bit. The other one's pretty straight, so that's about it. So now I'm going to smooth that bevel, kind of make that a little bit nice and round and rolled so that she can break over easily and lands on a smooth spot when she puts her foot down. But I do have to say, this is probably the nicest draft horse I've ever trimmed. You can see she's standing really well for her trim. She's just a really lovely horse all the way around. Love her hooves. She's just a joy to trim. And that's a pretty beautiful foot for a horse that big and heavy. They can have nice feet, That's for sure. Now I'm starting to work on a hind hoof. I'm going to pick it out with the back side of my big loop knife. Generally I'll use my hoof pick, but the knife is set up to where that hook on the end can be used as a pick, and sometimes I prefer using that if I'm trying to get into a small area because the diameter of the tip is a little bit narrower than my hoof pick. Otherwise I usually just generally use it as the knife as it's intended to be used. So same as the other two hooves, I'm really just gonna address the hoof wall mostly because that's really the only part that's overgrown. There's no distortion, there's no big flares. Most draft horses will have big huge flares through the quarters that are really hard to get rid of, and this horse does not have that at all. She has a nice straight strong well connected hoof wall that pretty much goes all the way from her heels to her toe. There's really not a weak spot on that hoof. She has good concavity at the apex of her frog, which tells me she has good sole depth too. So these are some of the healthiest hooves I work on, and probably the healthiest draft hooves that I work on by a long shot. Just gonna open up that frog a little bit, otherwise I think this hoof is pretty much done. Now I'm just gonna create my bevel from the top side of the hoof. Just want to rasp that rough edge off, kind of smooth it out and roll it and make it nice and round. And she's not too pleased with that. I don't know why though. I can't remember why she was moving her foot around. Normally she stands like a statue the whole time I'm trimming her. And I think I did this video in the early spring or at the end of the winter, so there shouldn't have been too many bugs out. But anyway, that looks pretty good, and I'm probably going to move on to the next hind hoof. So now working on this last hoof, I generally, one of the main things I like to do when I have the hinds up is to check for medial-lateral balance as always, but I also want to make sure that the wear pattern on one side of the horse's body matches the wear pattern on the other side of the horse's body. So it does, maybe has a tiny little bit of a flare, but other than that, looks pretty good. I think that you can see now you can see, sort of. Had to change the position of the camera, I guess. But the lateral side of that hoof wall was kind of more just shaped in kind of like a smooth arc. And then on the medial side, the side I'm rasping right now, back by the heel right there, there's kind of a bulge in that arc that the horse doesn't have on the lateral side. So that also coincides with the hoof that is diagonal to that in the front. That's the hoof that has the crack in the toe. So there's something going on diagonally, and it's very, very small and very subtle. But there's some asymmetry there that's showing up in a diagonal pair. So not that she has any lameness or anything like that. It's just something interesting to take note of and pay attention to and try to notice if it changes in the future. I've got that hoof pulled forward now, and just like the other three hooves, I'm just going to finish my bevel from the top. Just kind of smooth things out, make them nice and round, help that horse with her breakover. But these are such beautiful feet. I really have to do very little, just basically removing any excess material, mostly from the hoof wall, and that's about it. So that bevel's nice and smooth, but after this hoof is done, I'm going to show some footage of an ergot being trimmed on this horse. They're very common for draft horses, and they grow about the same rate as the hoof wall. So if I see one that's long, I like to take my nippers, like I'm going to here, and just remove as much as I can. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Leave any questions and comments below.